All right, and we're live. Sorry for the delay there. Just taking a little bit of time to get this stuff going because there's a lot of moving parts here. um, yeah, so what I'm going to do in this video, or in this live stream, I guess, is try to go over some of the misconceptions that I've seen about the Sundara pads, the Hyphamen Sundara pads, and also just sort of like how the Sundara measures, because it's really not straightforward at all. And I thought it was back like last year when I did my review and called it, the 2020 Sundara. It's a lot more complicated than just that. But before going any further, I do want to establish, I guess, sort of what I'm not able to do. So what I have here is I have two Sundaras right here. This one here was from I want to say sometime. This is the one that I actually did that initial 2020 review on. So this was early 2020 when I got this, and then I got this one in, and then this one. Sorry, this is the one from early 2020, and then this is the one from 2021. Now I don't think there's any difference between the two. Between these two, because I think whatever change happened, if there was a change, happened way before that as far as the actual headphones go. And actually, even in an interview with Fang Bian back in February 2020, he assured me that they hadn't made any changes to the Sundara driver in over 1 calendar year. So now my thinking with that is, if you change the driver like after the initial, like the first run or whatever, and make some tweaks there, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's stock allocation is going to be the same. There may be some units out there that have old stock, but I think we can assume that at this point, if you're buying a Sundara through a dealer, through any random dealer, like a local shop or whatever, as long as they are consistently moving through them, I don't think you'll find an old model Sundara, because I certainly haven't been able to find one. And I was even just like recently talking with Sean Olive on Twitter about this, because Sean Olive also got in a Sundara, and I was looking at the pads. And the long story short is that I'm just as confused as I think everybody else is about this, because the pads that he has, they don't look like the original ones, but they don't look like the ones that I have here either. Although they're closer to the ones that I have here as well. But the point of this video, I think, is going to be to, I guess, demonstrate that the Sundara doesn't actually have the base roll-off that you may have seen in measurements. And I think there are some other differences as well, and I think the pads do make a small difference, but a lot of this is a lot of the variation that we see may have to do with something else as well. So let's first, I guess, let me just get out of the way, the stuff that I can't do here. And first and foremost, I don't actually have the original pads that I back in I want to say like early 2019 I had, because I've now evaluated 5 Sundaras. 3 of them sounded and measured like the original, or sounded and measured similar to what you see from Crin and a number of other reviewers. All 3 of those were sent directly from Hyphamen from China back in 2018. Now that's you'll find that review in my other older channel, and all these pads that I have here right now, well, I only really have two different pads. They're not those original pads. They don't look like them. And the other major caveat in this is that the pads that I am evaluating on this right now are smushed to all hell from shipping. So, and they're actually a little bit damaged on this side here. So the unfortunate side of this is that this live stream is not going to be conclusive either, because not only do I not have an original old unit, for the Sandara. I also don't have those original pads, and these pads that I am using here are, I don't know. They may have been the original pads, but these are, I think, the Pali pads. And actually, the gentleman who sent them over to me is in the chat. It's Kai-Fi there. And so correct me if I'm wrong on this, Kai-Fi, but I believe these are the Pali pads. I think these are also the ones that you can buy from Hi-Fi Man. Now, this, I'm just going to show you some of the results that I got here. So actually, let me make sure that's not covering too much here. So, and also I just want to show you, I don't have anything equalized. So equalizer is off. But basically the brown line here is what I ended up with just as the default stock Sandara. That's this one here. And then this one is also from early 2020. And they measure the same, right? Basically, they're within a margin of error, like they're within, unit variation tolerances, basically the same. Then I swapped, and I still have it on here, the Pali pad. I'm only doing the right side here, so we're going right side and right side. Then I swapped the Pali pad onto the 2021 Sandara, which again is the brown line here. And the result that I got was the purple dotted line here. My amplifier turned off for some reason. Now, my suspicion is that there's more to it than just what this shows, because while there's not that much difference depending on the clamp and the method that you use for measuring it, one of the things that I did notice, or one of the things that this looks like to me, the purple line here with a base roll off, what this looks like to me is the kind of behavior that you get with the air gap when there is an air gap. And so just maybe not to the extreme that you would get if you had a massive air gap. So it looks like there's a little air gap, because usually what happens when you add an air gap, say you put your finger in between the rig and specifically these planars, the Hi-Fi Man planars, is that the base will go up, usually somewhere around here. It's different depending on which one it is. Sometimes it's a little lower, but yeah, usually the base will go up a bit and then it'll drop off pretty dramatically. And that is kind of what this looks like to me. So what this indicates to me is that there probably isn't the same consistent seal that you get, that you may get with the default pads. And so even some of the measurements that I've seen recently that were done that show that there's a base roll off, it could be that they're using the same pads and they're the same revision and that there's no difference, but that the seal is different and the seal is maybe compromised in some way such that there's some air gap that's not there when you're actually wearing it. And actually, I'm going to show you guys what the base level is when you're actually wearing it, again, for the default pads. Now, unfortunately, you can't actually determine any of the rest of the frequency response above like 600, 700 hertz, because you can only really evaluate. I mean, you can, but it's not comparable with anything else that's done on the Gross rig, for example. You have to use it's just within your mics basically. But yeah, so for the moment, I think the assumption that we should make is that if we're buying it from a dealer, from a regular dealer, we should be getting the consistent this brown line here. I think that's the most likely scenario. Where it gets tricky is, and I'll do some measurements here so we can actually do some testing and see, because it does also vary a little bit depending on position and all that stuff too. So I think where things get tricky as far as the measurements that you may have seen of the Sandara is that for whatever reason, it seems like reviewers who are getting Sandaras sent out from the manufacturer or through some connection to the manufacturer directly from China, they may be getting older units because that just might be where the stock is allocated for it. Now, this is stuff I can't confirm. I have no idea really. I haven't spoken to the manufacturer about this apart from Fang Bian himself, when he said that they hadn't made any driver. That there is no version 2, that they hadn't made any changes. There are a couple other things I think that are worth noting as well, though, and it's from that interview. He did say that they changed the pad material to make it more reliable, and I think that's true. I mean, straight from his mouth, right? So of course it's probably true, but also I think it's evidenced by the fact that if these are the older pads, they've definitely deteriorated. And so if they switched it up with the material for the pads to make them more reliable, I mean, it's obviously a good thing, but that also does indicate that yes, there was definitely some change to the pads at some point. So what we have is there's a number of different factors here. One is that reviewers and people who are measuring the Sandara may be measuring old units, and Critical has also stated that his that he measured at Zeppelin & Co. was an old unit. The other is that there are two potential changes that may have happened since the Sandara's initial sort of release. One is an original driver change, likely for reliability reasons, way back originally when they first released it, and then the second is some change to the pads. The second one, the change to the pads, is the one that's really obvious because they look physically different. Again, these ones, it's tough to tell because they're smushed to all hell, but yeah, I mean, we know for sure. I mean, there's photos of the different pads, so that they did definitely do a pad change at some point. And also, yeah, you can even see like the newer pads are more bulging and the older ones are more flush to the sides. Now, the fourth thing that we need to consider at this, I think, is that because these are planars and they're making a lot of them. I don't know. I mean, ideally there wouldn't be any unit variation, but I think there is also the possibility of some unit variation being a cause for this. So yeah, I'm just gonna read some of the chat here. Both the OG Sandara and HE6 SE fell apart in the same way. The pads, yeah. So this is from these pads are from Ki-Fi right there. So he was kind enough to send these in. Yeah, but these are definitely like deteriorated. This one is worse. The one that's actually on here is not bad. And yeah, so I think there's a lot of people who are, there's measurements out there that sort of contradict one another, especially when it comes to the base level. One other thing before I do a few measurements here, I want to also, I guess, point to what Sean Olive recently measured. I'm not sure if he's watching right now. If you are, hi, Sean. But what he recently measured showed basically the same frequency response as the brown line here, but his did also show a base roll off. I think I don't know. I need to chat with him a little bit more about that, because I think we can. I'll show you guys in this what happens when you actually have the coupling on your head, and it doesn't give you the base roll off. So either his unit has base roll off, and again, this is the unit variation question, or it's because I don't think that he has the original. I don't think he has a unit from the original run, because I think he bought it. I mean, he bought it from Hi-Fi Man directly, but he bought it recently. So and the rest of it also measures like the brown line. But my other suspicion there is that it could be that the 45CA or whatever he's measuring on doesn't have the same clamp that you would get when it's actually on your head. Now, I'm not sure what the actual clamp is of the 45CA. I know there was some consideration there about the overall distance between the two ears and whether that was representative. But the nice thing about it is that you don't have to constantly be swapping out the ears, which is a major pain point for me. But it may be just a question of clamp force, because if he's not getting the same clamp force, then that could introduce the same air gap behavior, which would cause this kind of roll off to show up. So in any case, let me just actually first do a measurement here of. I'm just going to get rid of this. And yeah, so I'll answer some questions in the chat, because it's going to take me a bit of time here to go through some of this, and it's really annoying to swap out the pads. so you're gonna have to bear with me on this one a little bit, and I'll try and answer questions in the chat while I'm doing this. And let me know how the audio level is, if this is okay, because I can't see my my indicator right now. Yeah, mini DSP ears. A lot of people were measuring on the mini DSP ears as well, and that's what I did my original measurements on as well. So I was able to show that. I think one of the questions is like, is it just about positional variance and clamp force? And my answer to that is going to be no, because there was very obviously a difference in those original 3 units, like as far as how they were heard. Another variable to this as well is that the reviewers who were listening to these and doing reviews at the time were the initial reports from the same reviewers were that they had a bass roll off and upper mid range shout. So for example, if you listen to what Metal 571 has said on the subject, his initial impressions every time he's heard one were that they had a bass roll off and upper mid range shout, or some sort of mid range oddity. And then the one that he actually reviewed, and I encourage everybody to watch that video that he did. The one that he actually reviewed, it measures like that, or he said it sounded like much more like this brown line where it extends all the way into the bass. So I think that's another indicator there, and most likely, this is my suspicion, but most likely to ensure that you're getting the good measuring one, I think you can be fairly confident that you will, because I think even in the case of what Sean Olive has measured, I think even those ones should have full bass extension there, because I mean it does look kind of like it's showing some sort of air gap behavior, but I don't want to put words in his mouth because I'm not sure what the methodology was there. I'll need to have a chat with him about that. So let me just I'll catch up in the chat here, and then we'll do some measurements here. Good mobile amp for Sundara. You know, people are talking about the hip DAC, and you could use the hip DAC. I don't know. The Sundara is a like, the nice thing about the hip DAC, which it would work, is that it has the bass boost function for people who want the bass shelf. So that's one other thing to keep in mind, right? It's never going to have the Harman bass shelf. It's gonna be a flat, or pretty close to a flat line, right? This doesn't have the Harman bass shelf. So for people who want that, you would use something like the hip DAC. But I don't know. I have mixed feelings about using the Sundara portably, because it's an open back anyways, and it also does take a decent amount of power. Like for example, the Amps and Sound Kenzie I have back there is not something that yeah, it's not something that can drive it, or at least you could probably drive it to a certain degree, but maybe not to its fullest potential. Was there any unit variation between the 2020 and 2021? No, I don't think so. So both the 2020 version that I have and the 2021 version that I have, they measure the same. So, and both of those are different from the original 3 that I measured. So, and to describe the original 3, so the first one that I heard, I got just 1 in, and I was like, oh yeah, this is the Sundara. This is how it measures. This is how it sounds. Then I got on and that was, I think, from a Head-Fi loaner tour. Then Hi-Fi Man sent me 2 units. I think they meant to send me 1, but they, for whatever reason, accidentally sent 2. And so, and I didn't receive them both at the same time. But I was evaluating one of them. Another one showed up, and like, what is this, right? So then I was curious about whether or not there was any sort of variation, because unit variation is a thing. So I measured both, and they both measured exactly the same. So at that point, I was convinced that, it had the features that it had, which was a slightly forward and more analytic, and almost bordering on shout there, with a bit of bass roll off. And then literally a year later, I got this unit in, and that was from a dealer, from a store. and immediately when I opened the box, I was like, wait a second, the pads don't look the same. They don't feel the same. And I thought, when you open up a box with a headphone in it, and there's like, you can see the pads, the way that it's packaged, maybe the pads are like compressed a little bit and then they kind of expand. And I thought maybe that's what's going on. And it never expanded to the full size of the original ones. And the consequence of that was that when I would wear it, it would be way more comfortable, right? So the original one that I had, this part here, the front part, was pretty thick still. And that made it so that it was, it would clamp a little bit too far in on my jaw. And I think I even said that in that original review. And then just, I don't know if you guys can see this here, but the way that the pads kind of bulge out here, again, I don't know if you guys can see this, but so the way that the pads bulge between the like cloth material or like hybrid material or suede or whatever that is and the leather is different, right? So on the original one that I evaluated, this was flush, straight down, and on these ones, which is the 2021 or whatever the latest one is, on these ones they kind of bulge, so they go over a little bit. So that was another pretty clear and obvious indicator that something different was going on. You just ordered your Sandara a few hours ago. Awesome. Yeah, so like that's the thing. I was just going to say, like, if you're going to buy a Sandara, I think you can be confident that you'll get whatever everybody else is getting. Like, I think it's been long enough that you don't need to worry about, is it an old one, is it a new one? Even the stuff from 2019 from dealers was all the same, all the newer ones. It's just the original ones from way back that were sent directly from China to reviewers. I think that's really where the confusion plays a role, or that plays a role in the confusion. Does the Gross rig properly measure under 100 hertz? Yes. I mean, we don't go to 10. I have it going to 10, but there's no point in showing that because human hearing is from 20 to 20K. Yeah, the Gross, the Gross is 10 to 10K. And so ideally we would actually clip off the rest of this because it's not as accurate as the stuff from 10 to 10K. But my feeling, I mean, I may actually do this when I may lop off the target. And this is something that I think Sean Olive has also advocated for. And big thanks to Jude for pointing that out. But at least to me. But yeah, I agree with Sean Olive on that you should probably lop off this top part of the target just because the 711 couplers are not as accurate above that. But my feeling on this as well is that if stuff does show up there is still information there. It's just that it's not going to be as accurate as what's going on below it. And then also there's so much variation up above 10K that depends on positioning and stuff like that. That even if it were accurate, you still wouldn't get a perfect representation because of positional variance. And actually, it's funny, with Jude's setup, he's got a really interesting way of ensuring that the positioning is accurate. And that's something that I have no way of doing at this point because it not only does it require, he's got the 5128 for starters, but he's got a really cool way of being able to ensure that the positioning is accurate, or at least that the positioning is symmetrical. Whereas on mine, I just have to do a much more, I guess, time-consuming heuristic approach, and then try and make sure it agrees with what I hear. But for that reason, I just sort of say, okay, there's some information up above here, but information, of which I like that I don't know what. Like that's basically the way I approach it. Is there a big step between the Sandara and the LCD2 as big as between the 2F and X? Yeah, that's an interesting question. So the LCD2F, as far as technical performance goes, and all that stuff, I want to say it's pretty close to that step between the Sandara and the LCD2F, as between the LCD2F and the LCD2X, which really does go to show, the LCD2X is right here, but it really goes to show how good of a value the LCD-X is when it's only a couple $100 more than the LCD2F. So, going to talk about headphone sound quality scaling linear in a linear fashion, and to price. And yeah, there's definitely it definitely doesn't. There's some bumps along the way there. And then of course when you get into the like ridiculously high end stuff, that stuff is not. It's not about price to performance at that point. It's about what the market will bear. And if you make some, I mean, I've said this before, if you make something that you think is the best, that's better than what everybody else has done, then, you can probably justify it to yourself to price it quite a bit above what, the competition has, even if it's only like the tiniest little bit, like marginally better. So at that point, it's more about what the market will bear. How much are people willing to pay for, a Susvara or a Focal Utopia or LCD4? And like, I think that's fine. Like, in general, I think headphones should be less expensive, but there are definitely, I can see it from the manufacturer's perspective as well. If you make something that you think is the best, whether or not it is, and in some cases it is, like I think the Susvara actually is the best. So, in my opinion, I think that they are justified in pricing it as or more than what the competition is. But I also think that we should be talking around about $2,000 to $3,000 level products. So it scares me a little bit that the price trajectory has gone exponentially upwards in the last 5 years. So there is that. I'm just catching up here. Yeah, and you do want to have an amplifier for the Sundara. I saw a while ago someone said because the impedance on the Sundara is not very high that you could drive it from whatever you want. But if you look at the sensitivity, the Sundara sensitivity is actually quite low. Sensitivity. So you do need an amplifier for that. Slightly larger pads diameter wise. I'm also led to believe that the pad volume will influence the tuning. So I'm not totally sure. It's actually, I was talking with, I don't know if Matt Economist is in the is in the chat here, but he's got some really good insight on that stuff. It's been fascinating talking to him and learning about that for planar development specifically. Let's see. Some people say the LCD4 is so dynamic. It sounds like a dynamic driver. Is the LCD4 even usable through a day, or is it too heavy? It depends on the person. Like I know people who have no problem with LCD4. I can't wear it for more than an hour. But it's definitely heavy. Okay, I'm gonna give it a shot here. Let's see what I get here. So this is with the Pali pad, and I'm gonna have to probably do a few. All right. It's actually weirdly didn't change at all depending on the positioning, but it actually makes a certain amount of sense. All right, adding a little more clamp pressure here. And that changed a little bit there. Whoa, that changed there as well. It's interesting. But the base level stayed about the same. So you do this is where you were getting a bit of roll off. Now, just another thing to keep in mind is I'd normally do this at around 90 dB and not 85, or not 84, whatever it is. But I'm going to be actually using in-ear mics, and I don't want to like blow my ears. So that's why you see some of the squiggliness in the bass. It's not as clean there. One more position here. Oh, is it really loud? I'm sorry. I'll try and, yeah, that's definitely peaking. Just blasting everybody's ears while I'm worrying about my own. So let's make this more readable. It's interesting to note here that there's some variation depending on clamp pressure. It's for those last ones, I did change the clamp pressure a little bit. So let me just do this. So this is the pally pads. I'm gonna try and take the pads off. It's really annoying to take the Hi-Fi Man pads off. So something like that. All right, that's basically what we can expect here from these smushed to all hell pally pads. I mean, it does actually also feel kind of like the inside material is a little different on them. I'm not 100% sure though. That could just be, yeah, because of the smushing during shipping. I know that for Ki-Fi this is not going to be conclusive. So you know, or at least not as conclusive as I would like it to be. I have to take these pads off. And try and read the chat while I'm doing that. By the way, it's not only the pads bulging more over the edge, the new revision pads are also bigger in the back and thus more angled. So that would make sense, yeah. So it could be that you know, the main difference is that they're more angled, like the angle is stronger. You usually saw that in the Zeos, you know, had the old revision Sindaras. Yeah, I think that is probably accurate. I'm just, yeah, I don't know if these pads are those pads because I mean, they look about the same thickness as this, but which is the default one, but because they're, you know, smashed to all hell, it's hard to tell. There's a hair there, lovely. But he wants to see the driver. One last thing I will try is I also have the HE5XX pads, which is the Deva, so the Deva pad basically. And I know that there was somebody who was asking me to try this pad on the Sandara. Now, unfortunately, that's not really possible in you know, the way that it should be, because this is not strictly circular, whereas the Sandara pads are. But I will try and mount it there in some fashion because I can get some of the clips in. So now the trick is going to be to try and fix these pads. I'm glad that they've moved away from this style of pad swap, because it is annoying to do, and like you can, like, I'm sure people have like broken the plastic ring through trying to, you know, swap the pads out, because you have to kind of, you know, bend them a little bit to get them to go. The bottom one. Yeah, Sandara is way better than the HE5XX and the Deva, both in terms of frequency response and in terms of technical performance and, like, yeah, resolution, detail, all that stuff, all that nebulous audiophile stuff. All right, now let's try this. I just reattached the pads, so as long as the default pads, as long as I don't have any, as long as I didn't miss one of the clips, this should indicate something. Let's try it. some variation there. Is it too loud still? Shouldn't be. I'm just going to turn this way down. This is what I deal with every day. All right. Yeah, I guess I have myself a little quiet because I don't want to clip. Again, this wibbly wobbly shit over here, don't worry about that because that wouldn't happen like that if I was doing this at like 90. So, all right, I'm just gonna get rid of all of these. Imagine muting instead of enjoying the brain massage. Sorry about that, guys. I'll try and make sure it's quiet for the next one. Oh my god. One thing I don't like about Rue is that it doesn't reset the that stuff. So, I mean, yeah, obviously the little wibbly wobbly shit, but just imagine that's not there. So you know, this is kind of what I'm talking about with whatever the default one is. That's the one I just measured. It doesn't roll off in the bass. This one does. Now it's got some other weirdness here with the shout. So I'm just gonna, like, at this point, I don't know. I think there's a couple things going on here. I think with the other pads, they maybe are not. I don't know. This is interesting. The second time I did this, it didn't boost here. It just rolled off. So, yeah. And I'm not sure what's going on up here. But I think a couple of different changes. One is that the actual volume could be different for the pad. And that might be causing it. Another change could be the air gap. And let me just show you guys what I'm talking about with the air gap. With Hi-Fi Man headphones specifically. So I'm deliberately putting a gap in between the pad and the rig, and what I'm expecting is the bass to go up here and then drop off dramatically. So it's gonna go up to, I don't know where it's gonna start, but some boost is what I'm sort of expecting, and then a massive drop. And I think this is also gonna change depending on how significant the spot at where it is gonna change depending on how significant that is. There we go. See, that's the behavior that I'm talking about. Now, when I showed you this, you see how it kind of elevates here a little bit? I was thinking maybe it's getting like a tiny little version of that. Like you're getting a little bit less seal, and therefore it's elevating just a tiny little bit because it's right at that same spot. So that's just my hunch. So yeah, what happens with the Hi-Fi Man headphones is that when you break the seal, there's a bass resonance that goes up like crazy, and then it drops off like in the sub bass. And so that's what you're seeing here with this screen line. But and again, that's even with the default pads. So can I link Imgur for textbook page? Yeah, dude, go ahead. Yeah, it's something that I'm starting to like. I'm doing this test almost every time with because you're on the money with yeah I'm trying to do this test almost every time with planars. I mean, it matters for dynamic drivers as well, but they'll behave differently. So with dynamic driver headphones, you'll get a roll off if you break the seal usually, whereas with these Hi-Fi Man planars, you get the bass resonance there. Again, I long conversations with Matt Economist are it's worth having if you're interested in this stuff. I don't want to put him on blast, but he's been really helpful in sort of, you know, educating me on this subject. But you can see it, like when you're doing the tests, you can see it happen, and yeah, I want to start doing it more and more. Interestingly, with the Odyssey headphones, they don't behave quite the same way, and I think the reason for that is because the pads are so massive. Not the like opening necessarily, but like the physical pad is so huge. So I think maybe that plays a role. But then, you know, on every planar that I measure, I try and do now an air gap behavior to get a sense of where the basically where it's going to roll off, where the boost happens. Because there are definitely some that will show it a little differently. Let's see. Are you going to make a video to sum up the results? Probably not, because I'll probably make a video if I am able to find like an original Sundara. Then I'll be able to, you know, visually show the differences in pads a little bit more comfortably, because again, with these ones, I don't feel all that confident about them because they're, yeah, not in perfect condition, not in good condition. So I don't want to say, oh yeah, this, you know, here's the original pad, or here's the Pally pad, when it could be the fact that it's in poor condition that causes it to have some of these features. But the reason why this is interesting to me is that this measures like the original one does. Like, this measures like the old one. So, you know, this has the shout. This has the dip at 2K. I think the old one had if I remember correctly, had a little bit more going on here, like in the mid section. I don't know. It could also be because of this specific. This is the 2021. Like, or this headphone is from 2021, and this, I don't know. I mean, it has a little bit of a bump there, even on the default pad. But it could be that, you know, there was some other variation or something in the past. Sorry, let me just read that question here. What would be interesting is testing out the Final Audio D8000 Pro, since they talk about having very good results with and without the seal. It's so funny. I was talking about that just the other day, or just yesterday. I was having a chat about that. And yeah, it behaves differently. It doesn't have. I need to go back through their marketing material but yeah, from what I'm told, they did some really interesting stuff there to be able to achieve, you know, bass extension regardless of the, like, if you wear, you know, glasses or something like that. And be able to achieve good bass extension with, you know, regardless, and not have some weird feature like they keep it linear. Let's see. I have a second bought in September 2019 with their original ear pads. Like, do you know though that they're like for sure the original? Because so I did my review of the originals before that, but again, they also came from China, so it could have, you know, I'm suspecting that when customers ended up buying them, even in 2019, they were buying the same revision that I have here for 2021. I'm assuming that there was no, you know, that they didn't actually change anything in 2019. I think whatever change actually happened way before that. I just think that the review samples that people got sent out were potentially the older ones. I think that's the reason why there's so much confusion on this subject. And I only think there was really one change to the pads. I don't think there's two changes or anything like that. I think the bigger question, as Hi-Fi has pointed out, is that if you buy a set of pads from Hi-Fi Man, which ones are you going to get? And that's the thing I don't know the answer to. But you can even visually see the difference. It's a very obvious one. When it's the actual old ones, you can see it. They sound like they have the dip. Yeah, the base level question is an interesting one too, though, because as I mentioned earlier, the one that Sean Olive just recently bought, again from Hi-Fi Man's store, he bought one, and it shows the same bass roll off as the purple one here, but then it also has the more agreeable curve here for, it doesn't have the, you know, upper mid shout. So I'm guessing that there's just something going on. Either there's something going on with that unit that causes the roll off on his, or there's something weird going on with the seal. But, you know, in theory, if something weird were going on with the seal on the 45CA, which he uses, if that's indeed what he used for this. I don't again, I don't want to make assumptions here, but if there was an issue with the seal, you would see something more like this, right? Well, not to that degree, but you would see an elevation more similar to what I showed here, because I think that's really what's responsible there. Oops, let's get that back. And no, you don't want to run this off of a phone. You don't want to run a Sandara off of. I mean, like, I don't know. Maybe there are some dongles that have an amp in them, but and there are some phones that have an amp. Like there's some phones that can actually drive like 300 ohm headphones. The LG phones, for example, the V30 and V40, V whatever, ThinQ, it's a terrible name for a phone. But yeah, they have amplifiers in them. I still wouldn't run a Sandara off of that, but I think maybe that would have a better chance of driving it. But no, I really think the Sandara is like it's a desktop, like sit at home or at your desk, or in your living room. It's a sit at home, type of headphone, because it's open back, like really open, and then you use a proper full size amplifier. I think that's the way to go. Now with the caveat, of course, that a lot of people are looking for smaller all-in-one solutions, more portable, DAPs and DAC amps, just because of like convenience of desk space. And in that sense, I get it, but I still think you'd be better off getting like a Modi Magni or something like that, like a Magni 3 Heresy. LG V60 will make sound with the Sandara, but it's really weak. Yeah, I don't know, maybe play around with the settings there, because it should be able to do a little bit there. Make sure it's on the high gain setting. I'm not sure. And also the other consideration is that you generally do want high current for planars inefficient planars. What does it mean for the driver to breathe if it doesn't relate to loudness? Is having high current or power? Sorry, I don't know what you mean by driver to breathe. I don't think that's a term, like an acoustic term. But no, in my experience, it's not just about loudness. I know that there's an orthodoxy on the subject that might suggest otherwise. And I think past a certain point, it probably is, like as far as the amount of watts you're throwing at it, the amount of power you're throwing at it. I don't think like the overall amount of watts thrown at a headphone, like past a certain point, does not matter. I don't think, because even an HE6, like yeah, people are driving it with like speaker amps and stuff, but there are headphone amps that have 14 watts a channel. I mean, I don't think it's for 99% of headphones out there. That's not necessary. But no, I don't think it's just about loudness. I think when it comes to amplifiers, it's so much more about the transformers. And like, well, it depends on what, like, so for example, the tube amp there, Kenzie, is more about that. And I'm not a huge fan of op amp, circuit stuff. Even though the Magni 3 Heresy is, I prefer this more toroidal transformer stuff. But that gets into the whole subjectivist, psychoacoustic sighted biases thing. What do you think about SPL Phonitor SE with LCD XC? It's fine. You don't need an SPL Phonitor XE for the LCD XC, though. You really, like, the XC is a very easy to drive headphone. The main thing with the XC that you're going to want to consider, it's a fine amplifier. I'm not saying it's not a good amp, but the main thing with the LCD XC is you don't want to have high output impedance. You want to have low output impedance with that one, because my understanding is that there's a part of that has like a filter in it, and you don't want to mess with that. Although I could be wrong about that. That may just be the older designs. I'm not sure about the newer ones. Just ordered a 560S and curious how they compare to the Sandaras. Similar. The 560S is a bit more spicy in the treble, like around here, like somewhere between 4 and 6K. But it's still good. I mean, it's got really good bass extension on the 560S, better than the 6 series. It's not as bloomy in the upper bass as the 6 series is, or the 6XX at least, or 650. I still don't think it's as detailed as the 650 or the 600. It doesn't scale the same way, and it's not as detailed as the Sundara either. But it's got a decent soundstage. I think actually Chrono's going to be doing a review of that soon. Do a video about connecting to headphone amplifier with different cable, please. Not sure what you mean by that. Connecting to headphone like interconnects, or like headphone cables. Because headphone cables, in my experience, don't, unless they're broken, they don't make a big difference. With interconnects, it will make a difference if when you're talking about tube amps and like shielded, like RCA and stuff like that versus non-shielded. There's probably some difference there. I was talking with Justin from Amps and Sound about that, and one of the ways to sort of reduce noise in tube amps is to make sure you're using shielded interconnects. But that you don't have to spend money on that. You can get cheap ones. And also, his advice was also to use a balanced power conditioner if you're like building wiring. It's not that good, and mine is terrible. Actually, I reached out to Underwood Hi-Fi to send up the. I think there's a product called the Equicore. He sent that up for me to use, and it did help with the noise floor. So there's that. The other thing, of course, is that there's always the question about ground loops when you're dealing with single-ended amplifiers, and so that's an issue. And then of course USB also, in my experience, sucks. I mean, sometimes it can work great, but sometimes USB can be pretty bad too. So I tend to prefer optical. At least when you're dealing with single-ended stuff. When you're dealing with balanced, I don't think it matters because, yeah, you have, like, if you're going balanced from the DAC to the amplifier, you shouldn't get any noise floor whatsoever. Yeah, V60 has impedance sensing. You have to spoof it. I remember that. Yeah, that's annoying. You got to use like an impedance adapter and get a fairly high one. And it also depends on how the adapter works, because sometimes it'll be the wrong way. Do you think the Sundara benefit from balanced output? Is it worth getting the Magnius Modius stack? Or is that overkill? I think it's a good idea to get the Magnius Modius stack regardless. Like, I think that's a great stack to go for, over the Magni 3 Heresy and Modi. Mainly, I mean, there are two advantages to running balanced, like tangible advantages. The first is power. You can get more power generally out of a balanced design. The second advantage is that you don't have to deal with ground loop issues, or like you're not going to run into any noise floor issues with a balanced balanced for the DAC and then the amp. But like also you can get an amp that has a balanced amplifier like the Kainai HA6, run it with RCA and use the balanced outputs, and you won't have any problems. So I'm not saying it is necessarily the case that you're going to have ground loop issues or other issues if you're running it single end. I don't want to make that suggestion, but if you are having those issues, running it balanced will fix that. Should fix that. I'm sure I've missed a question. Guys, if I've missed your question and you really need it to be answered, like, use the super chat function and go as like low as possible. Do you think the Sundaras benefit from balanced out? Oh yeah, I just answered that. Does the Sundara driver have ripples and bumps, divots, or is my unit defective? Not sure what you mean by ripples. Like the magnet, or like on the bars, or in the diaphragm, or yeah, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Any recommendation for an amp which has clarity and punch? Not the A90, that's for sure. Rebel amp is good. It's single-ended, as far as I know. The Rebel amp is quite good. I was even comparing that with the A90, and I like the Rebel better. Wheezy says, I take the Sundara over the 560S any day, but the 560S is good. Sorry, we're talking about the Sennheiser headphone, not Hi-Fi Man's HE 560. For anybody unaware, I know Wheezy knows what we're talking about. Yeah, better daily driver in terms of... Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I personally think the Sundara, I prefer the Sundara because I like a planar presentation more. I mean, that's the thing, like, as much as, like, when it comes to that the quality of micro detail and micro dynamics, I don't think there's any immediate benefit for planars over dynamic driver headphones. But when it comes to the overall sense of like clarity and control during busy passages, planars have an obvious advantage, a very noticeable advantage. And then the only other sort of limit there is like the distant, like when you get to the very high end, sort of like $4,000 plus. Then yeah, planars do pull ahead for detail, like the crazy nanoscale, like the LCD4 and the Susvara, Abyss AB1266 TC. I do think those are all more detailed technically than any dynamic driver. Now the tunings are sometimes not ideal, but like the Susvara is the only one there that's actually got like a nearly flawless tuning. Sorry, Sneakers, what was your question, man? Feel free to ask it. I'll try and get to it. Oh, I see it now. What's the best amp only for Sundara for 2000? Only for Sundara. I don't think you need to spend $2,000 for an amplifier for the Sundara. I think if you, again, somebody mentioned it before, but so that's the other thing. Sundara doesn't scale the same way that like an HD6XX or 600 scales. Or Sennheiser HD800 or like any high impedance dynamic driver headphone. The Sundara doesn't scale like that. You do want to give it an amplifier that has good current. So I'm going to recommend, under 2,000. Geez, I'm going to recommend the IHA6 with a balanced output specifically. That'll work great because that's sort of what it's meant for. It's meant for these types of headphones. But also, like, you don't need that. Like, you can go lower. You can go Modius Magnius. I think that would work great, and it's convenient, small form factor. It's THX 789 is probably fine. I like the IHA6 better than the THX 789. Sundara or LCD1. I go Sundara. Just trying to think if there's any other good amp that's in the like $1,000 range that would be good for it. If there's anything else that I heard recently, not off the top of my head, but I would stay away from the A90 personally. Like the A90 is basically what you get if you want to win at Synad. If you want to win at ASR, then you get the A90 and you get the D90, but and the D90 I thought was great, but the A90 I was not a huge fan of that. But I didn't hear it for very long. I only heard it for like a little bit, and next to the Rebel amp, and the Rebel amp was like way better. So, but some people really like winning at Synad. They really like making sure their amplifier is like the most transparent, measuring thing, which is great if you want that. But for me, I like a little bit more flavor. What balanced cable manufacturer would you recommend for the Sundara? Whatever's cheap. I use like $30 cables off of Amazon, and they sound great. They don't sound any different from, at least not to my experience. Like, again, maybe I'm not hearing what cable proponents are hearing. I was talking with a buddy of mine who has he was actually lent me something from Moon Audio. Silver Dragon, one of those cables, and I honestly didn't notice much of a difference. Like it was within the realm of like if I would have needed to have two of the same headphone that measured identically side by side, one with the $30 cable and one with the expensive cable, and then back and forth. And I'm not confident that I would have been able to identify a difference. Yeah, make your own. It's fun. It depends where you live. Because I looked into that, and getting that stuff for where I live, it's a nightmare. At least right now. Army ADI2, I would say no, actually. So yes, the Army ADI2 is excellent, but if you want something with like a high current balanced amplifier, something like the IHA6, I would not. I don't think the ADI2 is that product. It's a DAC amp, but the real benefit of the ADI2 is the DAC, and then also because it's a 4490, 4493, 4492. I can't remember. The original was 4490, and then the FS I think is 4493. But the real benefit there is that you can change. It's got the EQ function in it, which is great. 789, yeah, that's great for the Sundara. You don't need more than that, I think. What would make a good upgrade from the DT880 for around $500 or so? Would the Sundara be a good option? Depends if you like the sound of the DT880. Because if you want something that is warmer than the DT880, you may want to, I don't know, $500. So like, I'm sure there are lots of headphones out there that are going to satisfy people more than what I'm going to recommend here, but because it all depends on preference at that point. Because again, there's a lot of people who love the DT880, especially like the 600 ohm stuff, and there's the DT990 folks who will fight you if you disagree with them. It's quite funny, but in my opinion, that landscape is dominated right now by the Sundara, and then when you get up a little bit more, things go a little bit up, you get into the Focal LX territory. Because I think that's the other thing to remember is that the Sundara was like $600 at one point or something like that. Like it was way more expensive than it is now. It's just technically on permanent sale for $350. So, and I think it competes with with what its original price tag was at. Maybe that's when you would, like, at $500. Maybe that's when you would get into the HE560V whatever, if you can find one. Although I've seen those for way less than that too. So I've seen those for around the price of the Sundara. So I don't know if it's better. The tuning I don't think is better, but maybe for technical performance, I'd have to compare side by side. The other thing to consider is that if you can find that Adorama deal for the HE6 SE, get that and get a crazy amplifier. That would be pretty close to end game. Any reviews of the Cayenne C9 coming soon? No, I'm not familiar with that one. LX is good if it works for you. I mean, I know there's lots of reports of failure rates there, but I don't know what the issue is, because I've never had a Focal headphone fail on me. So some people have, but I haven't. I may never review the 1990 due to the rabid fanboyism and and firstly the haters. No matter what I say about them, I'll get people coming for me. But that's why you have to do it. We need more, let's say, trustworthy takes on that stuff, because there's a lot of hyperbole in this hobby. This is something that, like, I don't know, I should probably do a video on this at some point, or like a separate stream on the subject, or maybe have a guest on. But one of the things that I see more than anything else is people watching a review just to validate their purchase and say, look for other people saying that it's great, whatever the product is. Oh, it's the best thing ever, it's great. Therefore you should, feel good about what you bought. And that's not really what a review is for. And the other thing to consider is, like, a lot of people bought DT 1990s based on the reviews, that were out at the time. And I think, and it's not to say that it's bad across the board. It does certain things really well. But I think for a lot of those people, the DT 1990 was like the first high-end, audiophile product that they ever bought. And so it's bound to sound, good to them, because it's better than an M50X or whatever, right? Like or whatever they may have had before. And it certainly does soundstage better than the HD6 series. So if that's what people are looking for, then yeah. But I don't think it's even remotely competitive with, stuff around that price tag. That's one that I would skip. And I got a hard time recommending it, even for studio use. I don't think it's good for studio use. because, well, it depends. If you're looking, I said this in the last one, if you're looking to identify the flaws in a studio, yeah, you could, the 1990 would be great for that. But if you're using it as a reference point, I hope that they're not using the DT1990, because it's not what it like. That was the whole project with that was Harman's initial, or Sean Olive's initial project with Harman Research, was to find agreement between recording equipment and playback equipment, and like the last thing you would want is for that to be the frequency response of the DT1990. What didn't I like about the A90? Two things I didn't like about the A90. The first was the ground loop issue. Which was really noticeable on it. You right away, you notice it, so you got to run it balanced. I mean, yeah, I don't want to like pigeonhole. There's always gonna be exceptions here, but like you would probably want to run it balanced and then get rid of that problem. The other thing I didn't like was as far as the sound quality goes, is comparing it directly with the Rebel amp, and I was using the Focal Celestia at the time. This was at the office. I found that the Rebel amp just had so much more going on for the dynamics than the A90. Like the A90 sounded like it sounded like it was giving you like, yes, sort of like more of a reference kind of sound, but in a boring way, if that makes sense. And again, this is one of the, like, people see me doing measurements and stuff and they think, oh, he only likes reference stuff. No, I like stuff. I own the Verite. So, I mean, yes, I EQ it, but I don't EQ it to the target. What do you recommend for source gear for the VC? Prices around 5K. Ooh, I recommend a 2 amp. I recommend Amps and Sound. Well, maybe the Mogwai, if you, or one of their higher end ones. Like I only have the Kenzie here, which I'm doing a review of that today actually. So I'll be releasing that probably early next week when the video is going to come out. Yeah, I would get one of the high end Amps and Sound amps for VC. But make sure that you get the right output impedance, and you can actually talk to Justin about that and figure out what would work best for that. Also, the Pendant SE is another one that came out recently, which is maybe worth looking into. I mean, that's their, it should work, right? It's their amp. But yeah, I like the Amps and Sound amps a lot with the Verite. I will say I don't know if I really like the 300 ohm out. As much as I like the high output impedance with the Verite, I think it sounds great. You are going to run into a little bit of noise floor issues there if you do go with that 300 ohm out with the Verite. So maybe, I mean, you could use the 32 ohm out and it would work. But I think for the overall power output, I would go with the higher end. I would go with the Mogwai. And then I would go with, talk to him about what would work best with the Verite specifically, so that you don't get noise floor issues on the high impedance out. This one I think would work better with maybe maybe the Sennheiser stuff, the high impedance Sennheiser stuff, or some of the bigger dynamic stuff. Or it's funny, like it basically turns every headphone that works with it well, like Synergy, or synergizes with it well as far as the output impedance is concerned. It turns it into magic. It's brilliant. So Focal Utopia on the 32 ohm out would be a ton of fun, because you'd get just a hint of extra bass there from the output or from the impedance bump on the Utopia. And same thing with the Focal Alex and the Alire. Unfortunately, it doesn't work so great with the Clear, not because of synergy reasons, but like as far as the output impedance is concerned. But it boosts the bass too much on the Clear, I find, and it makes it just a little too warm. But some people may want that. I don't know. Do you think there's any way in the future that we'll figure out how to correlate subjective impressions of source gear with objective measurements? I don't know about source gear. That is because if you look at what ASR is doing, right, and you see the stuff that he's ranked, I mean, he's doing very interesting stuff as far as like he's capturing a lot of data, but he's not making that correlation, right? So at least not the one that I think you're talking about. So if you buy an amplifier based purely on Synad, you're not going to necessarily get the best sounding amplifier for the chain that you want. I think more better than looking at that and being like, okay, this ranks here for this highly for Synad. All that stuff is beyond the audible threshold anyways. So I would instead look more at like what ask yourself what type of sound do you want, and then look into, I would say look into different options for that, and look into potentially having different options for output impedance. Like that old rule of like as low output impedance as possible. Like it is still important for certain combinations, but it's not essential for all. And then I also recommend looking into high end tube amps as well. But that's the other thing too, is like I have a hard time getting really excited about amplifiers, because even though they do make a difference and they do sound different from one another, the difference is pretty minimal compared to the difference that you find with headphones, or the difference that you find with like tube amps and stuff like that. Like the biggest difference that I hear, for example, is when using the balanced output on the IHA6 compared to the single-ended output on the Magni 3 Heresy. Even though they're both good amplifiers, the IHA6 is clearly better as far as dynamics is concerned out of the balanced output. And then the same thing with comparing the Rebel amp directly, volume match with the A90. I just thought the Rebel amp is very obvious that Rebel amp was more engaging. I tend to go more subjective as well in my source impressions, but I've not heard much past entry level. Currently on the Asgard 3, and I like it, but I feel crazy sometimes. Yeah, like there's so, I don't know. That's the other thing. It's like I worry a little bit that when people get too into all the data for source gear, like it's important. You got to know what's going to work and what the synergies are, but and like how a certain output impedance is going to affect the headphones that you're trying to use. But I think beyond that, I don't think it's worth caring too much about how amps and DACs measure. Yes, with the exception of, I think for ESS based DACs and the IMD hump, I think that's pretty important. But yeah, I'm with you there, man. Like, and that's the other thing, is like maybe if I knew more about how to correlate, to get back to what that other question was, which is a great question, I think, like to be able to get more into, to learn more about like how to correlate this data with the experience, or find out some, whatever the measured phenomenon is, correlating that with the experience, I think would be more important. And so far I don't know anybody who's really doing that. They upgraded the pads for the Sundara in 2020. No, they upgraded that way earlier. It's just that reviewers got old stock. I think that's because I was a reviewer then and I got old stock. So people who were buying them, I don't think had old pads back then. Because I remember Metal 571 and I both had, like, Metal 571 had the new version Sundara before I did, and he had it in 2019. So that should indicate pretty strongly that those pads, and he got them from a store. So, I think that indicates that at least in 2019 they were actually in stores with new pads. Shopping for a studio headphone and now avoiding the DT1990. Thanks for that. What's your take on the LCD2 2020 995 versus LCD X for studio use? LCD2, okay. There's stuff I can't talk about with that. I think for LCD2 and LCD X, you're probably going to want to look into doing some EQ for studio use, because you want to get it as close to, for studio use. Okay, this is the other thing. Think what you want about Harman, right? I am not even a Harman proponent. If you watch my Harman video, I criticized the curve specifically, at least for open back headphones, because I think for closed backs, I think they're onto something fairly important. But for open backs, I was a little critical of the contour here, the dip, and also the overall base level of the 2018 shelf. I think 2013 is totally fine and agreeable, because if you look at it, right, all the features before ear gain, let's start at 900. All the features before ear gain, the overall boost that you get from the 2013 shelf is like 2 dB at most, 1.5 dB. It's not really that significant. Or wait, am I even? Yeah. Something like that, around 2 dB. So it's not huge. Wait, is this? No, yeah, it's around 2 dB, I think. Probably a little less than 2. Let's go with that. But yeah, for studio use, you would want to get reasonably close to Harman. Why? Because that's going to get you as close as possible to a reference kind of sound. And when I say reference, I don't necessarily mean like the best for everybody, but it is predictive of sound quality at the very least. Of you know, people more people like it than anything else. But the main point of the project initially was to get measurement playback equipment and recording equipment to agree, or like the recordings to be mixed and mastered on equipment that when you listen to it, when the average person listened to it, you know, they on something that, you know, had this tuning, it would sound good. So that's why I think it would be important to do that as well. Like, use for mixing and mastering and like studio use, AKG K371 all day, every day. That's yeah. And there's so much, like, I highly encourage everybody to read the research, because there's a lot of misconceptions about it. I see it like almost on a regular basis whenever I publish a video where I use the target, and people are like, wait, like, why are you basing it on this target? You know, this target is it's based on consumer preference, and it's like, you know, mass consensus. And when was the last time, you know, mass consensus was a good indicator for anything? Look at the music industry. I completely agree that the stuff that has the most mass appeal is of, you know, it's not of the highest quality. But if you look at the whole point of the project and what they're trying to do, trying to take what is essentially agreed upon as good sound in speakers, let's say flat measuring speakers in an anechoic chamber, and figure out what that would be in a headphone, because you wouldn't be able to measure that at the eardrum. In an anechoic chamber, putting a microphone in front of a speaker, it's going to measure differently from the way that would be at your eardrum. And then of course, if you take that same speaker and put it in a decent room, it's going to measure differently as well. So they took that speaker, I can't remember which one it was. I want to say LSR 305. Anyways, they're Harman listening rooms where they did this, and then they actually used the 43AG, and they derived a target curve there initially. Now, from my understanding, and I think I got this wrong initially, but from my understanding, the curves that they then applied to that when they were doing their testing with before they even let people like adjust bass and treble level, when they were just asking for what people preferred, as far as I understand, they used Sean Olive's 2009 curves for that. But yeah, I think Metal's back. So I think RR1 and RRG were from 2009, but I could be wrong about that. Somebody can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong about that. But I mean, if you look at the overall point of that project, so much of this research that was done was more to, we're getting off topic here, but it was more it was more that it proved that this, like the consumer preference research proved that this is what people wanted, or what people preferred, and that it was that, and also that it's predictive of what people are going to like. It wasn't about necessarily, it wasn't like, they just took a bunch of people and like averaged out their preferences. It was more about like they had a number of different target curves, and then they had the default headphone, and then they EQ'd it to the different target curves, and they EQ'd it to this one, and it proved, the research proved that this is what most people preferred. So, or at least the 2013 one, and then they obviously changed it over time. Sorry, to get back on track here. Have you heard the Sandara with bigger pads like Brainwav's XL Velour? No, but I generally think that swapping pads to aftermarket pads is usually not a good idea unless they're specifically made for that headphone and they have the graphs to back them up. So some of the Dakoni ones are made specifically for certain headphones, and they do publish graphs, so that's a good thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, how should I do this? I have this pad on here right now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the bass level for for the headphone on my head. So just to prove that the Sandara does not actually have bass roll off like I've seen and a number of measurements. Alright. We gotta swap out the yeah, it's this one. You guys chat with Metal571, he's there for you. Alright, so that's that. We're gonna get some more brain massaging sign sweeps going here. So I'm not sure if you were here for the initial ones, Metal, but I made everybody go deaf running sign sweeps. I think that's plugged in. Yeah, we should be good here. Okay. Yeah, I think well, let me take glasses off here because we don't want any gaps caused by glasses. I have really thin arms on my glasses, so I don't usually worry about that, but just to make sure. So what we're going to look for here is just base level. We're just going to look for information below, I don't know, 700 hertz just to be safe. Let me just test where we're at. And I got to probably turn on my amplifier again. Whatever reason, this one I can't talk about. Shuts off when it's inactive. Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's gonna be a bit lower, so it's gonna look a bit weird. Let me just turn this up to try and match. Where are we? 83? A little higher. Maybe. It's not gonna match, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so again, this can only be taken on its own. We can't take it in conjunction with anything else. I'm just going to get rid of everything else here. So this proves, I mean, it is a little lower here at 30 hertz, but it doesn't have the roll off that you're seeing, you know. And this is you know, with the in-ear mic on my head. So let's try it again. Reseat. Make sure that the microphone is in there. And clamp will have an impact on this, as well as if you have thick glasses, like thick arms, you're going to probably get more bass, but then it's also going to roll off as well because of that air gap behavior that I mentioned earlier. Right? So again, we can't take this stuff because this stuff, like, we're getting just Pinna and Concha. Concha is somewhere around here. So we're not getting any of the other gain factors, and that means that it's significantly less. So you can't take any of this into consideration. But all the stuff below where the Pinna would actually be affecting it, the lower frequencies, that should be reasonably accurate. So again, this is on my head. I'll do it with glasses here in a sec. Looks pretty consistent to me. Okay, now let's try it with glasses. And these are very thin armed glasses, but it can still have an effect. Let's see if it does. Nope, not really. I don't know what the hell's going on here. I'm sure Mad Economist has an answer for that. But doesn't look like any meaningful difference. So that being the case, I'm going to now try and take this pad off. Get rid of this. Do that. Let me just get the original measurements back in here. So just in case anybody came here late, this is not how the Sandara measures. We're just checking for base level and roll off. So I'm going to get rid of these and then have both of these. So what I'm going to try to do now, inconclusively. How about thicker glasses? I don't have any. I need to get a new pair of glasses because I hate the way these look on my face. That's why I take them off in my videos. You guys know that. I hate wearing glasses. I hate having like stuff on my face. It feels horrible. Don't read into that. So now we're gonna try and put the HE5XX/Deva pad on here. And again, this is the most recent Sandara I got up, and I don't think it's gonna work because the Deva pad connects with clips. Actually, I wonder if I can take this off. No, I can't. So there's an adhesive to this material, so it's not gonna work at all. But I'm gonna try it anyways. And the problem that we're gonna run into here is that the base is going to look really weird here. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Oh, wait a second. That's not. Hold on 1 second. I forgot to switch the inputs. Okay, now we can test it. So if you were to, in some way, remove the Deva adhesive and then put it onto the Sandara pad frame, you could do something like that, but this is really just for fun. Yeah. So you can see the air gap is massive. Of course. That's because there is actually an air gap. That's what I was talking about, right? Just consider it from here upwards. That's actually not bad. That really isn't bad at all. I mean, it gets a bit crazy up there with the air. So maybe let's just adjust this. I'm kind of impressed. I think it's a little too sibilant. This is going to be sibilant if you try it. But as far as the ear gain is concerned, that's pretty cool, actually. But no, I would never do this. I don't think you need to. I think if you buy a regular Sandara, you will be fine. Let's try it with a ZMF pad. This one, the base should be a little more normal. Actually, with these, I do have... Is Kai-Fi still in the chat? Kai-Fi. Question for you, Kai-Fi. Can I take one of your pads? Can I take the frame off of it? Because then I can actually attach other pads like the ZMF pads and stuff like that. Should be kind of fun to try. Would you mind removing the mesh? Would you mind removing the mesh from the old pads if you don't plan on using them again, so we can see if that is part of the upper mid dip issue? The mesh. Not sure what you mean by the mesh. Like, do you mean the middle part? Okay, I'm just gonna take this off because the adhesive is basically worn out. So, taking the pad off. Do you mean like this middle part? Like, this also looks like it's worn out, like this mesh part. So actually, yeah. So you mean, do you want me to take this middle mesh part off and then reattach the? I could try, but let me just do it with the ZMF pad first. This is the ZMF. This is either Verite or BE2. I can't tell because yeah, they look very similar to one another. And it's perforated leather, perforated. I think these are actually the Verite leather perforated pads. So the flat pads, basically. If anything, I would imagine that what would work is the hybrid pads, because that's or hybrid perf or something like that, because that's the same as what the Hi-Fi Man pads have. But you know, if you're wondering, I mean, about like trying to improve the sound, I don't know why you would need to do this, because the default pads already are very close. Gosh, I'm not a fan of this clip system. LCD2 EQ, although just stay tuned on those. I can't really say more than that. All right, this is not working as well as I'd hoped. It's becoming more of a challenge to get the clips in. Okay, I got 2 in. Because when you use this pad, it kind of overhangs the clips a little bit, so it makes it more difficult. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this design because there's a good chance you could break them, I think. Like the wait, am I? No, this is right. Like the little plastic ring. $3 watts? I don't know about the SE. I really don't. I'm not sure. You'd have to ask Android that. Oh my god, I can't deal with this. Okay, we're not going to use this right now. We're just going to put the ZMF pad on and then try it like that. My gut instinct on the HE6 SE is that you probably want more than that. Just because that is that one really weird, like power hungry headphone. At least the original HE6 was. And I know Android is also using a. I think he's getting into speaker amp for it as well. Oh wow. So this is interesting. It's actually really good. This roll off stuff here I think is also part of the pad change, but keep in mind that this is not perfectly sealed on there either. So I'm not sure what exactly is going to go on there, but that's not bad. This design for the Sundara is pretty freaking excellent for its frequency response. Let's look at the original. Yeah, the original. So with the original pads, it's better. But the ZMF one gives you a little more ear gain. That's pretty cool. Yeah, the Concha interaction looks like it's in a better spot for the ZMF one as well. Look at that, right where it should be. Whereas on the Sandara pad, it's a little high. This could just be a seating issue, but it's funny, you know, when I was doing my measurements with the original pads in different like positions, this would change as well, but this time it didn't. So that's interesting. I'll do another one with the ZMF pad just to double check. But that's actually good to know that with these ZMF pads, if you're running into comfort issues with the original Hi-Fi Man pads, you could use the ZMF pads potentially. You'd have to use. I may do this later, and I'll post the results. But you may need to take this out and then break your break your regular Hi-Fi Man pad. Yeah, same result. So there is some bass roll off there. Are the stock Sandara pads the Pali pads different? Hi-Fi Man website says the Pali pads are the stock pads for the Sandara. So they might be, yes. And they look the same is what I'm saying. But what I found is that, I mean, at least, so Hi-Fi tells me that these ones he sent in were the Pali pads. Is that correct? And that these ones may have been the older ones. I think that's what's going on, and like they certainly are worn out. Like they're a little bit worn as well. So so that's part of it. But I think what we were trying to determine what we're trying to determine is if there's any difference in the pads, or if the pads were contributing any difference, and it seems like they are. Now, where I'm still left, feeling like this is inconclusive is that, oh, not that one, shit. There it is. Where I'm feeling like this is still inconclusive is that, we don't know if this is because there was like something happened to these pads. So I need an official original unit to be able to like be super confident. Pali pads you bought recently sound the same though. As what, the originals? Or as these ones? Yeah, so exactly. So it could just be that they updated the Pali pads. That's most likely what happened. But the big question that I don't think anybody has the answer to, that Hi-Fi also pointed out, is that nobody knows what Hi-Fi Man is selling for pads if you buy aftermarket pads. Like if you buy the pads from them, just the pads, nobody knows if those are the redesigned ones or the original ones. So like my recommendation, if you are looking at buying a Sandara, I don't think you need to worry. I don't think you need, like, it's been so long since they did these changes that I think you can just be confident that what you get is representative. Just don't buy used, and buy from somewhere that's like reputable, right? Buy from like, buy from somewhere that sells through, right? You don't want to go to some back alley, trench coat deal where someone's like, hey, you want to buy some Sandaras? So far, Flux's LCD4 is the best planar I've heard. Nah, man, Sisvara. No, just kidding. I haven't heard Flux's. Those are the ones on the unit Oratory measured. Yeah, and they measured like this, right? They measured like the purple one here. Like Oratory measured these, and it measures like this, like the old one, with the weird kind of, I don't know what's going on here, and then the 3 to 4K thing, and the bass roll off. Is that what you're saying? Because I think that would make sense. Because he doesn't have a measurement, as far as I know, of whatever the one from the dealer is. I got replacement pads under warranty twice in 2020, and they were both the new revision. Not sure if that's the same thing as buying them yourself, though. Yeah, I don't know about that either. That's basically what I would like to know the answer to, so that you can, so that at the very least I'd be able to recommend to people who have the original Sundara, go buy these pads. But I can't say that for sure because I don't. Maybe I just need to buy some from Hi-Fi Man, put them on here, and then measure them. Maybe that's the answer. I took the. Those are the very same pads, is what I'm trying to say. He measured my headphones. I took those pads off that very headphone. Yeah, that, and it measures like this. That actually, so what this means is that whatever difference we're noticing here has more to do with the pads, most likely, than any actual revision to the headphone or the driver or anything else. That's what this indicates to me, because we're seeing the same result. Like, I don't know how else to really think of this. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's still a little bit confounded by the fact that there was a driver revision way early on. So, you know, but I'm measuring the same headphone with two different pads. That's what you see here, right? So these are not two different headphones. It's the same headphone. Orange is with the default pads, and then the purple one is with the ones that Ki-Fi sent me, which I assume are just the older pads. I think that's, let me know if that's right, because that's, the weird thing to me about this, though, and it's, again, I can't verify 100% because these got smushed in transit, I think. So I remember the original pads being thicker and less angled, as somebody else pointed out as well. Like, you can see it in, I think, even like a Zeos review, that the original ones are thicker, but and the newer ones are more like, they're thicker in the back on the newer ones, but they're more angled. Did he finally get? Did he finally get the new ones? He used Resolve's data, not his own. Yeah, no, as far as I know, he's still using my data for that. I don't know if he has the new ones yet. But this is what I was telling Sean Olive as well. Like, that's why I was saying, send a photo of the pads, because he got them directly from he bought them from the Hi-Fi Man store. So I don't know what's going on with stock allocations and who has what pads or any of that stuff. But and his showed base roll off. But because the rest of his frequency response matches mine, like it's just that his shows base roll off. Like, his looks like this, basically. This 1K feature, I think, is a unit variation issue with this specific one, but for the rest of it, it's his measures very similar to this. It's just that his has a base roll off, like a more significant base roll off. So, I think it could just be a coupling issue or something like that. Because we saw, I mean, even with the, not that. Even with when using in-ear mics, this is the in-ear mic measurement, it's still well extended in the bass. Like, it's one to, at 20 hertz, it's like a 2 dB deviation. Yeah, right about 2 dBs. But at 30 hertz, one. Oh, maybe no. Hold on, maybe one and just over one at 30 hertz. That's too high. What am I doing? One and a quarter, 1.5, depending on which one you use. It's less than one on one of the seatings, but yeah. Those were bought 2021. It's not even, it's not March yet. Oh, 2019. You from the future? So yeah, I mean, I want to see if I can get Sean Olive another unit, or see if he can, I don't know, maybe I'll have a chat with him and try and figure out if he's using a 45 CA, or if there's some coupling thing that's causing it to not have the bass. Sean has wrecked pads. The photos looked like the old, like, they looked weird to me when I first saw them, and then I took a photo of mine. I thought, maybe it's just like the lens. You know how like wide angle lenses can distort the edges? I think that's maybe what was going on there. They looked like they bulge out like these ones do as well. So I think they're probably the same. But then again, as we saw, I mean, even the Pally pads, the older Pally pads kind of look like that too, when the right kind of compression happens to them. So I really don't know. What did we learn from this? I don't know if we learned anything. No, we can't take the in-ears because it's also like, it's also not at the eardrum. Yeah, the purple one. It's not at the eardrum, right? So we're missing canal and drum resonance gain, which counts for most of the gain that exists. So I don't think we can base anything off of that. We can kind of like, one of the things that Mad was able to do was he was able to plot the difference between my ear and the KB 5001, and showed that mine has some sort of feature going on at around 2.5K. So maybe that's what you're identifying. No, I can't show that because, sorry, you're asking if I can show that the new pads are thicker in the back. See if they are. I can't really show that because again on these ones they were potentially smushed in transit, so they don't look all that different because like I wish I could like, I don't know. Well, I wish I could get like an original unit with the original pads and then show you guys that, because these ones don't really look different in any meaningful way. I think, I mean, just looking at the back, the bottom one here, the bottom one is the old one. Sorry, I can't get to focus there. Just looking at the back, you guys can't see, it's not really that great, but like, so as an example, I've now almost completely destroyed this, but the back on the older one, this is just sort of a suspicion, right? The back on the older one is more like flush here, whereas the back on all the way around, it's symmetrically bulging on the default one. So I think that is like an indicator, if anything. Resolve is bulging. You have no idea. Okay, so basically I'm going to cut the stream there, guys. But let me just sort of conclude here that if you buy a Sandara today from a reputable dealer, not used, you are most likely going to get a response that is something like this. And that's a good thing, right? It doesn't matter, like, there's no one dealer that gets a special unit or anything like that. But maybe there are some from Hi-Fi Man, like specifically, that are not this, that maybe it's a different stock allocation that we don't know about. But I imagine that for North American dealers, that's the other thing. I don't know what other countries have, but for North American dealers, this is probably what you're gonna get, because I now have two of them that measure like this, and yeah, I have no reason to think, and they were both brought in from the store, so I have no reason to think that this would be anything else, or that there would be any other result. The only weird thing is that Sean Olive bought one like the other day from Hi-Fi Man's Amazon store. So it was Hi-Fi Man still, but Amazon, I think. And that one has a base roll-off. So that's the only outstanding weirdness that I'm noticing here. So it could be something with the 45CA, which is unlikely, because the 45CA is it should be the same, should be comparable. But it is a slightly different coupling there, because it's I mean, if I use this in the upright way, it's the same thing, but I don't know what the actual distance is on the 45CA, whether that's similar to what you get with the actual head, a human head. So maybe there's something there that is causing there to be some sort of leakage or something, where it's not perfectly, where you may be getting a little bit of the air gap behavior and then you see the roll off. That is of course a possibility. Of course, there's also a possibility that he has pads that don't have the same volume, which could influence the bass. But I think that's sort of this is what we should expect. Something like this is what we should expect. I don't know what's going on with the 1K feature. That's just sort of weird. It's the only real weirdness here. Um, but yeah. Oh, measure with the mesh removed. The center. No, that won't make a difference. It'll make I'll send you an image later with that because I will probably end up doing that. But it shouldn't make any difference because yeah. The only difference that may show up is at the most would be something in the upper frequencies. But I don't think this is going to indicate any difference in base level. Did you post the graph of Allegios with Dakoni sheepskins? No. You guys keep asking me, and I keep needing to do that. I keep running out of time. Amazon can have stock in their warehouse from a year ago. They also will add return stock to new stock if the box looks good. Well, that's good to know. So maybe that's what happened with Sean Olives. I'm not sure. It may have been an old stock unit. And this is the problem that with this whole thing when people are talking about the Hi-Fi Man headphones and how they measure and how, everybody's showing this bass roll off and this upper mid-range shout. I mean, Sean Olives doesn't show this, but his does show a bass roll off. So and I'm here sitting every one of the ones I've measured, like all the new ones I've measured from the store, don't have that problem. So, but I think this is why there's confusion. I think it's because reviewers, for whatever reason, end up getting old stock and they're not getting it through a store. So, yeah, I have no idea what's going on with Sean Olives' unit. I'll have to talk to him about that. My Sandara EQ. I don't have one. I mean, I just add a bass shelf there at around 100. Well, maybe 100, just over 100 hertz at a bass shelf. Then be done. Sandara is more comfortable and doesn't require pads or an expensive amp. Well, not an expensive amp, but you want one with decent power. Surely they have some sort of date code and the serial number or something. Your guess is as good as mine on that. I mean, yeah, there is a serial number here, but I don't know. I don't. You'd have to figure out where the cutoff point is, and I don't know. I can read this one out. This is number 21215358. They make a lot of these, which is great because these are awesome. But I mean, yeah, the Sandara is the headphone that I would buy pretty much over everything under $600. If you're looking for an open back planar, because you need an amplifier with this as well. So I'd buy a Sandara and an amplifier. I'd spend maybe around around $600 or something like that, and then be done. Never look at the internet again. I think it only really changes when you go to the Focal Alex, and then you start making that question. If you want more punch and slam, then you go with the Alex. And I don't know. Metal may disagree with me on this, but I think the Alex also has better detail because for the only limitation on the Sandara, I think, is that the mids are not as detailed as the Alexes. That's basically it. Yeah, and then when you go up to an LCD2F, that's Hi-Fi Man Ananda is the next step up there as well, for detail. But minimal, not huge. I'm gonna talk to Sean about his unit. Yeah, we're gonna talk about our bulges. We're gonna have a measure baiting session with bulges and units. Yeah, I could ask Hi-Fi Man, but see, that's the thing is I've gotten mixed messages from Hi-Fi Man because they've the marketing group has stated specifically that there is no revision, and it's true, there is no official revision. There's no version 2, but when you talk to certain other people, they talk about how the pads were changed to improve reliability, and that's so far everything that I've seen here. I mean, even the fact that this old pad is it's deteriorating. So again, this is not I'm not able to say conclusively that this is the difference that we can expect from the old versions to the new versions or old pads to the new pads. But what I can say conclusively is that something happened with the pads that's different, and this is the likely result. So and then yeah, from Hi-Fi Man themselves, I mean, they've given some have given the message that there's been no change and no change to the pads even. But then you see other people, like somebody actually even posted this on Twitter saying, I feel like it was like maybe a Portuguese website where the Hi-Fi Man rep was talking about the revision. So, you know, and then even on the review itself, somebody from Hi-Fi Man also commented on how they're always, you know, looking to improve stuff. So, you know, to me, I just imagine this is a situation where like some change clearly happened, and not everybody is sort of up to speed on what that change was, because visually it's a very minor change, and for the most part, it's not a massive change to the tuning either. It is a change, and it's a noticeable one, and the new one's better. But it's not like it's not like the old one was bad. It's just that the new one is better. And I get why they don't want it to be a big deal, and I feel bad that I even brought it up, to be honest. I was mainly just reporting my findings. I didn't realize it was gonna blow up and be that much of an issue. But yeah, I get it. I mean, imagine you're a dealer or like a store, and you have a whole bunch of old units, and somebody comes out and says, "Oh, the new ones are all better." Then you're like, "Oh, crap." So I just wish that it were easier to like get to the bottom of it and then not have to deal with that issue, but I completely understand it. Anyways, that's going to do it for this live stream, because I need to get to filming a video on the Amps and Sound Kenzie back here. So stay tuned for that. And I'll be publishing that sometime next week. And we also have a review coming up we have a HD560S review coming up from Chrono at some point soon, and a IE300 review. It's already up on the Headphone Community Forum, and that'll be published to headphones.com as soon as the video's up as well. So that's this weekend. So stay tuned for those reviews. And I'll be doing a Focal Clear clipping video to show at what volume it actually clips. Yeah. Alrighty. Have a good weekend, guys.